I have said on this program for 20 years, as well as on every major network in this country, including the Wall Street Journal, as well as my local radio programs here in San Diego for 20 years, that small business is the biggest taxpayer in this country. A small business person is also the biggest employer in this country, yet the small businessman is the least incentivized in this country. Joining me right now is Lloyd Chapman. He is the founder of a small business advocacy. And we heard about him, and I thought, here's a perfect guy to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that's empowering small business. Good to have you along. How are you?
Thanks for having me on.
So talk to us about, first of all, what is your organization? Talk about give us a 50,000-foot view of what you guys do, first of all.
The organization, the American Small Business League, and our main mission is to protect the largest economic stimulus program in history for the middle class, which is the Small Business Act. And that's administered by the Small Business Administration. Mm-hmm. And that law says a minimum of 23% of all government contracts should go to small businesses. Mm-hmm. But what we've exposed for over a decade is that's not true at all, and that most of that money actually goes to big businesses and even some of the biggest companies in Europe and Asia.
Talk to us, what defines a small business? There's an IRS definition, there's a government definition, and there's our definition. What is your definition of small business?
I think everybody knows what a small business is, but the U.S. Census Bureau says that 98% of all U.S. firms have less than 100 employees. I like that definition. Okay. The SBA did a study a few years ago that said that over 90% of U.S. firms have less than 20 employees and are responsible for over 97% of the net new jobs. So my definition would be 100 employees or less.
100 employees or less, and it doesn't really matter what kind of revenue they're doing. It matters about what the economic impact is of the amount of people that they're employing.
Right.
What's the problem? Tell me, and how do you identify it?
Oh gosh, about 15 years ago, I stumbled onto the fact that when you look at the Small Business Administration's database of small businesses, every Fortune 500 firm was in there, and dozens of the biggest companies in Europe and Asia. Mm-hmm. And as opposed to that money going to the middle class where all the jobs are created, it was going to big businesses. And
give me an example of contracts. When you talk about government contracts, we're talking about for roads, we talk about for computing, we talk about for everything.
Everything the government buys. So 23% of all federal expenditures, which in 2015 was $1.2 trillion, should have gone to the small businesses. I'll say the 98% of all U.S. firms where most Americans work. And in reality, that money was being diverted to big businesses.
Was that on purpose? Is there a conspiracy theory here that we should talk about?
It's on purpose.
So and it has to do, I'm assuming, with politics, maybe?
Well, what it has to do with, think about a pie chart, and you think about 98% of all the companies in America have less than 100 employees, and a little tiny sliver have more than that. Mm-hmm. And the law says the 98% are supposed to get 23% of the contracts. Right. But the truth is, big companies, particularly in the defense and aerospace industry, want every penny the government spends. So for probably 30 years, they've been lobbying to very slowly dismantle all federal programs for small businesses, woman-owned small businesses, minority-owned small businesses.
So, back when I was in investment banking, there was SBIC, Small Business Investment Companies, Minority Enterprise Small Business Investment Companies, that were actually sort of nudged along by the SBA. Now, the SBA sort of seems to be the culprit here, though. Is
Absolutely.
That right? You filed an injunction against the SBA, correct?
I've got one of the biggest lawsuits in there were filed against the government right now, and it's against the SBA.
Describe what that lawsuit says.
Well, federal law says small business shall get 23% of all contracts, right, and it defines a small business as having generally no more than 500 employees. Well, the SBA has fabricated compliance with the congressionally mandated small business goal mm-hmm. by excluding, I would say, about 70% of all federal acquisitions from that number to fabricate that number. Mm-hmm. And then they're giving small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms. So we've asked the judge to enjoin them from cheating small businesses by diverting the small business funds to large corporations and by fabricating the government's compliance with that 23% small business goal.
The Small Business League, American Small Business League, by the way, ASBI.com, guys, if you can pull that up on the screen there you can see a bigger voice for small business. And this, in your opinion, this is going to boost money, revenue, economic impact for small business, not just in one city or state, but for the entire country, right?
I think it'll be, if I win this lawsuit, it'll put more money back into the middle class economy mm-hmm. than TARP or the American Reinvestment Recovery Act. It'll be the biggest economic stimulus program in history, and I think it'll create millions of jobs. And plus, it'll just make sure that the law is implemented as it's written.
Talk to us about NDAA S2943. What does that mean?
Right.
What does it stand for? What is it?
Right.
And why is it a bad thing?
It's the Defense Authorization Funding Bill for 2017.
Okay.
And that bill's got to pass.
Okay.
So what they've done is they've snuck in some language in the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act that will essentially repeal all federal programs for small businesses.
Okay.
And
It's almost like the Patriot Act did for investment banking.
Exactly.
I mean, it was a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at it. I think the intention was great in the beginning, but they threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Same sort of thing here.
That's what they do. They sneak it in there. And it's a way, Congress can't get support for repealing the Small Business Act.
Right.
So they slip the language into the Defense Authorization Bill. And if that passes, it will be devastating to the middle class economy and I think the stock market.
It's now when governments award contracts, do they award them on the basis of merit or they award them on the basis of just the cheapest price? How does that work? Or is there a formula? Because there's so much money spent by the federal government. I mean, you go to usdebtclock.org and you see how much money we're spending, on the $50,000 F-18 ashtray for the fighter pilot. So the bottom line is there's a lot of money to be had there. You're not tackling government waste here. What you're doing is you're profiting on it at this point if you're a small business. But at the end of the day, how do they award those contracts? And if you are successful in this lawsuit, will it make it easier for the small guy to get that contract?
Yes, it'll make it much easier because they'll finally get the fair share that they're supposed to get by law. So I just want the law followed. That's all I want. I want nothing more than for the federal government and every federal agency to follow what the law says.
What about NASA? What about the DOD? Is everyone complicit in this right now?
Absolutely.
So this is an equal opportunity sort of offense.
It's across the board in government. Across the board, they're diverting federal small business contracts to some of the biggest defense contractors on the planet, and even.
Do they have an explanation? I mean, when asked about it, do they say, "Well, this is why we did this"?
Yeah, here's what they say. Okay. They say it's miscoding, computer glitches, anomalies, and simple human error. They've been saying that for 15 years. So for 15 years, the biggest companies in the world, Rolls-Royce, Finmeccanica in Italy, British Aerospace, have been getting federal small business contracts.
Sure.
And their explanation is, oops, I hit the wrong key on the computer.
You can only hit the wrong key so many times. Okay, well, before I let you out of here today, first of all, Lloyd Chapman, I want you to go to their website, asbi.com. How do we support you? How can you get support? And what are you looking for? People to come sign the petition?
Oh, I want people to call their congressmen, their senators, go to our website, asbl.com, take a look at the stories. People should be outraged at this. If I win the lawsuit, it'll be the biggest economic stimulus program in history. If I lose and the NDA passes, it's going to devastate the middle class economy, and it's going to cost America millions of jobs.
ASBL.com, that's the American Small Business League. His name is Lloyd Chapman. Why don't you call in again next week from wherever you are in town? We'll talk about this some more. What's our deadline here? How long do we have to collect signatures and support?
The lawsuit against the SBA will be heard by the court on October 6th.
Okay. So we're just a couple weeks away then.
Yeah, that's in San Francisco in Federal District Court.
All right. So maybe we'll get you on again next week and get you to get the word out again. Lloyd, thank you so much. Lloyd Chapman, American Small Business League. Go to asbl.com. I'll tweet that out to our 40,000 so you can see that, and we'll put a link to our website there as well. We'll post this up at bigbizshow.com. Thank you so much, Lloyd. Appreciate
Thank you.